Hello, we're going to take a look at the startup process, the BIOS boot process, and explain how you get from I turned my computer on to Windows is actually running or whatever OS is actually running. This is the process that happens. So on that motherboard, you've got a ton of things going on. You've got all sorts of little chips on there. And one of the chips, one of the slightly larger ones, is this basic input output system, or BIOS, that you basically refer to as a UEFI these days. And that's given control. And it's the one that's going to query and say, do I got a CPU that's working? Do I have RAM that's working? Do I have a graphics card that's working? There are certain key components that have to function in order for your computer to start. A computer usually will not start if it cannot find any graphics. In other words, why would I start up if I can't show you something on the screen? Now, that doesn't mean that it's checking to see if the monitor is actually there. It's actually checking to see if the graphics cards are working correctly, or the graphics chips, which means if you don't have a monitor plugged in, then it's booting, but you can't see it. So BIOS is activated, checks and says, I need a CPU to run, I need RAM to run, I need graphics to run, and then goes through the Cmos check. Now, this Cmos, what this really refers to is things that change. The BIOS is basic input output system that does not change. It's in the firmware. You can't upgrade it easily. There it is. There it goes. For instance, this kind of thing is used all over the place. You may have a special storage card in there that actually allows RAID and all sorts of fancy stuff, and it'll have its own BIOS for dealing with it. So this BIOS is on the board. It's basically hard-coded in there, portions are. It's harder to update. You have to flash the BIOS in order for that to happen, and that's a dangerous prospect. And then there's stuff that's in the Cmos, and so these things are kind of, together, connected together. And the Cmos is all the stuff that can change. Your date and time can change. The type of hard disk you have can change. Those kinds of settings. So the system says, I'm SATA, right? SATA is a way to attach your hard drive. So I got SATA here. Is something plugged into the SATA? The Cmos is, yes, I see something's plugged into the SATA, and it reported back to me that it's this type of hard drive with this much space. And that's stored here in the Cmos information. Once it's done its checks, I've got a CPU that's working, I've got a graphics card that's working, I've got RAM that's working, then it will initialize the hardware, meaning it's going to go through the process of saying, hey, we're coming on, we're going to work here. So it'll go through that process. And then it'll finally post. Now, post is a power on self-test. So we've gone all the way through this, and this is the power on self-test, really. This process of posting is basically saying, I am now ready to go. They used to beep. You used to get a beep, beep. How you know this is working is that you start to see, if it's an HP, there's the HP screen that came up, or the ASUS screen, or the Acer screen, or whatever it happens to be. You see that screen and I'm posting. I've gotten to the point where I've checked all the hardware looks good, we can run, boom. So again, how you see this, you see a screen that's not blank, you see something on it. That's the general rule. And you go, okay, I'm posting, that's working. Then the next thing it's got to do is find the operating system. So way back in here in our initialized hardware stage, it actually has a certain portion of your storage where it's created a bootstrap. Basically, it says, okay, right here in this little space on this storage, I know where the operating system is and what to do. And then it loads that OS into RAM. Yeah, your OS needs to reside in RAM for the most part. So this screen basically describes that. There's some things it described that I didn't, and there's a lot that I described that they don't, because I think it's really important to understand the boot process. That's it, though.